Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. This is your host, Howard Fox. The Outdoor Adventure Series celebrates individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, and access and enjoyment of the great outdoors. Our guest today is Robert Annis. Robert is an outdoor travel writer and gear reviewer. He gets paid to go out in the woods and, as he likes to say, chronicle the stupid things he does. Now, I don't believe that. His goal is to have readers say, if this guy can do it, well, so can I. Robert, it is a pleasure to have you on the Outdoor Adventure Series. Thank you for joining us.
Howard, super stoked to be here.
My gut initial reaction is like, how stoked are you here, buddy? But, I'm really so happy you were open to joining us, and for our listeners, like some of the past guests we've had, I met Robert for the first time up in Casper, Wyoming in May at the Outdoor Writers Association of America's, their annual conference. And Robert was one of the panelists, and he was chatting about creating work and reusing it. And it's like, this is a cool guy. He's also got a great beard, which, by the way, on our YouTube channel, you're going to see it. But Robert, yeah, thank you so much. And I could tell you're not on the road. You're in your home, I guess.
My wife, Dee, has let me back in the house for a little bit at least. So yeah, I'm probably going to be here for a few more weeks and then heading up to Michigan, back to Isle Royal National Park.
Isle Royal, something I am like incredibly envious. I grew up in Michigan and I know exactly where Isle Royal is, Isle Royale. Which one is it? Is it Royal or Royale?
It's Royal. And for years, I kept on calling it Royale. And then, going up there, I'm like, oh, I've been saying it wrong for 10 plus years.
Oh my, is this going to be the first time you have been up there?
No, I was there last year. I did a quick hiking trip up there for Midwest Living magazine. And yeah, it was great. Beautiful national park. It's the least visited national park in the lower 48. And the reason why isn't because it's not incredibly beautiful. It's just hard to get there. You have to
want to get there.
Exactly.
Okay. So I'm an opportunistic podcaster, by the way. You'll learn that eventually during the episode, but the next time, not this coming time, but the one after you get back to Isle Royal, you have to let me know because I have never been there and I've always wanted to go there.
Well, I wish we would have had this conversation sooner because I've got an extra kayak for this trip.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I'm for Fodor's magazine or Fodor's website. I'm traveling up there. I'm traveling to the largest lake or the largest island on the largest lake on the largest island on the largest lake in the world. So it's just yet another really stupid adventure that I'll be writing about.
I'm like really intrigued by these, as you call them, stupid adventures. So first of all, how did Fodor's get to you to say, Robert, we want you to do this? Or do they have a pitching mechanism and you respond to it? How'd that happen?
Well, I pitched them. And normally my pitching prod for when I pitch an article, I come up with an idea and then I think it's like, who have I worked with in the past that this would be a good fit for? So I met one of the Fodor's editors at a conference, not OWAA, but another conference, and talked to him about it. And he was very intrigued. So now I'm working with a different editor there, but they're super stoked about it. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great. I had originally planned to do it with another buddy, travel writer friend of mine, but he's going to be out of the country at the time. So right now it looks like I might just be going solo.
When you get there, this solo adventure, it takes effort to get there. For folks that don't know where it is, go up and hopefully my geography teacher, may they rest in peace, will not turn in their wherever, but it's in the upper end of Lake Michigan. It's on Lake Michigan,
Lake
right?
Superior.
It is Lake Superior. Okay,
Mhm.
so it's off of. Is it that would be West Minnesota? Would it?
Well, you can take a ferry from the Minnesota side or the Michigan side.
You're going from the Michigan side.
I'm going from the Michigan side, Copper Harbor,
Cop.
Michigan, which is also some of the best mountain biking in the Midwest.
Oh my! I just exchanged a message. See, I told you this was like having a conversation with a friend you haven't seen in 15 years. See, I warned you. So this is not going to be our traditional episode today, Robert. Let me tell you. I was just having an Instagram chat with some folks that have a biking business up in Copper Harbor.
Oh, great.
I'm wondering if they met me because they knew you or something. That's got to be. But so you're going to go up to Copper Harbor, which is I went up there when I was like a little kid with my parents and my sister, and that's a long trek to even get from Copper Harbor to Isle Road.
It is. If I remember correctly, I think it might be 2 or 4 hours via the ferry. I can't remember which, but you're definitely on there for a while. But, you're on Lake Superior, it's just gorgeous. And then when you finally see that landmass up ahead, you just feel those butterflies just come up, and you're just so excited to actually get on land and get started.
Okay, then how long once you get onto Isle Road will you be there?
This time around, probably a few days. So from the ferry, I'm going to paddle the southern end, then for, I think it's like several miles. Then I'm going to have a couple of portages to get from Lake Superior onto like several smaller lakes. So I'm going to kind of have to hopscotch from overland, and finally, after I think 2 portages, then I'll get to the lake in the island that
Okay.
is the ultimate destination. And then after that, I'll just spend a couple more days just hiking around, just exploring the beauty of the park.
Oh my God. I am like, what's going through my head right now is you're having this conversation with me and explaining this, Howard, this is what I'm going to be doing. I'm thinking to myself, okay, can I make this work? Oh God, life is so confusing sometimes. It's so hard. So how did you, I wanted to ask, how did you get into this position of being this freelance outdoor journalist? Before we answer that question, or you answer that question, for our listeners, share with us a little bit about your background, just to give them some context, like, who is this guy?
Oh gosh.
In like 500 words or less, by the way.
Well, most of my editors will tell you that's impossible for me, but I will try.
By the way.
So I was a newspaper journalist for the Indianapolis Star for several years. And then just like with pretty much every other newspaper reporter, I got kind of caught in the layoffs, and
A little pink piece of paper.
yeah,
Okay.
I got the message from my boss saying, "Hey, can we have a quick talk?" So that was kind of devastating, because for years being a newspaper reporter, I mean, that was my ultimate dream. That's everything. Most of my life was wrapped up in that. So after I got laid off, it took me a little while to kind of figure out my next move. So I went ahead and started freelancing for various websites and magazines. And before long, I realized, well, I'm making a pretty decent living, a decent living for a freelancer, which is still hand to mouth. But luckily, my wife, who is the brains of the outfit, she's always had a very good, steady job.
God bless her.
So she's the one who allows me to go on all my trips. She's the one like pushing me out the door and saying, "All right, I need a little bit of space. Why don't
She's
you?"
got a good life. I mean, when she gets tired of you, said, "Don't you have like a project you need to work on?" And,
Oh, yeah, that happens more often than you would think.
okay. When you were working as a journalist, had you had any contemplation or maybe even what I would call pre-contemplation, like, I want to start to do something a little bit different than being in this organization where I am responsible for producing these stories? Had you begin to have that kind of log with yourself?
Well, the funny thing is, for the longest time, I've always been an outdoorsy person. I've always been a traveler in my adult life. So I was trying to get my bosses to let me do some travel writing.
Uh,
I would still do my regular reporting gig, but if I went somewhere cool on a trip, I wanted to be able to write an article about it. And for some reason, they were not excited about that idea. So it was always on the back burner. And I did some freelancing for some websites and magazines while I was still at the paper. In fact, my first freelance gig when I was still with the Indianapolis Star, I actually was published in National Geographic Traveler. Yeah, so it's just been downhill from there.
Downhill from there. Yes. Imagine that. When you were eventually invited to visit the exit door and you perhaps took a couple of weeks, a month or so to kind of come to grips with, okay, now what am I going to do? Where was the first place you went to start to pitch ideas for this new life of yours for the outdoor travel writing?
My first, place I had three publications that I was dying to write for. One was Men's Journal, the other was Outside, and the third was bicycling. So I pitched and pitched and pitched, never got a response back. And so it weighed on me a little bit, but I I'm a reporter, I'm a journalist, so I'm nothing if not resilient.
Resilient.
Uh,
That's the word I was thinking of.
so I had to buy some new business cards, and I had a Groupon for business for like X amount of money, and I had some money left over on that Groupon. So I thought to myself, it's like, well, what can I do with this? So I decided to do something just completely out of left field. I took a photo of me during an adventure race where I'm covered in mud. I've got my helmet, glasses on, and my sunglasses, and I'm looking at a map, looking kind of confused, which is kind of my my normal state. And so I made a mouse pad of that with with all my contact info, so
Oh,
my
you
name,
slide dog you. I know what you're offering here.
and then I snail mailed it to each of the editors I was hoping to work for or work with. And lo and behold, probably within 2 weeks, all three of them got back to me. All three gave me assignments. And I've been working on and off with bicycling ever since. That's probably been like 10 years. And then for, I think about 2 or 3 years, I was a gear columnist for Outside. And then I worked quite a bit with an editor at Men's Journal until he left. So yeah, the stupid idea actually bore some some good fruit.
I wouldn't call that stupid. I would just that's out of the box thinking, Robert.
Yeah.
That's out of the box thinking. Now, would you have been writing and you've got Men's Journal, Outside, bicycling. Do you have a preference for a kind of writing? Is it I'm thinking that there's a gear review. Okay. So
Mhm.
whether it's a backpack, the latest carbon tripod, et cetera, or there's the instructional, how to shoot the Northern Lights, or in my case, how to shoot the Milky Way, which by the way, as I was looking at your Northern Lights article, I'm thinking I gotta show Robert my Milky Way article.
Oh, I'd
Um,
love that.
so you've got a gear, you've got instructional, you have the visiting these quaint little towns with the rivers running through them, or you have the outdoor adventure, Isle Royal kind of adventure. What's your preference? Would you have one?
Yeah, I mean, my preference is doing the narrative where there's actual there's a story there, whether it's the protagonist of the story or whether it's someone I meet on my travels, which always makes for a much better article. But unfortunately, unfortunately, most publications prefer service pieces where you go to a place and instead of having that narrative arc, it's more of, okay, so you want to go here and order this. And so it's just very much more of a standard, like almost like a how-to article.
Okay.
And those are great. And those are really beneficial for the people who want to visit these places. But it's, they're not as fun or as interesting to write as that more story focused article.
Now, when you're writing the story focused article, do you prefer it to be about someone else, or are you inside the story as well?
It depends. I mean, I've written stories, the more personal stories that I write, and there have been a few lately. I'm the one who is the protagonist just because I'm trying to figure something out in my mind, emotionally, what have you. So it makes more sense to do it that way. But I would say 90% of the time, the best travel writing is when the focus is on somebody else and you're seeing that area through their eyes.
Okay. Okay. Now, when you travel, are you hopping in the car, the train, the airplane? And I know we're going to talk about the big RV.
Mhm.
What's the, I don't know, typical option for you?
More often than not, I am in my van just because it's very self-contained. When I'm doing a road trip, I try to put together as many different articles and as many different destinations as possible, just so I'm making more money so I can actually afford to go on these trips.
When you're going to Isle Royale, for example, that's the ultimate destination for you to write the story. Do
Mhm.
you have some trips planned along the way where you're going to do some side projects?
Right now, I've got one other story on the books, and that's going to be a short destination piece on Grand Rapids
Okay.
for Indianapolis Monthly, who is one of my best clients. And then I've pitched a few other articles, most like multi-sport road trip articles to a couple of different publications.
Okay.
So I'm just waiting to hear back right now.
Okay. When you get to Grand Rapids, say hello to my niece and and her husband and my great niece and nephew. So I'll give you their phone number, address. All right. So when you're going to Isle Royale now, you've got the self-contained van. How did that become your vehicle of choice to make these excursions and to again start creating your work?
Well, the hashtag van life has been a thing for a while, but I've had friends with vans in the past, and it was funny because I just mentioned to my wife just randomly one day, it's like, oh, I think I need to get a van, and just expecting her to kind of laugh me out of the room, and she's like, I'm surprised it took you this long
Oh,
to say that.
really?
Yeah,
She's all
so
in.
yeah,
Okay.
so she was all for it, and luckily it was just kismet where not too long after that, I was on this van group online and a person about 2 miles north of Indianapolis reached out to the group and said that a family friend had passed away, left him the van, and he didn't know what to do with it. So he was just going to sell it and what would be a fair price. So I messaged him and told him, it's like, well, it looks to be in great shape. This is how much I'd paid for it, and good luck. And he got back to me probably maybe a week or two later. And he told me, you're the only one who hasn't been hounding me every day since I posted this about the van. So if you want it, it's yours. So I paid a little under 10 grand for it and went up, got it, and had to do a little bit of work. And of course, being it's a 21-year-old van, it could legally drink if it wanted to. We've had a few issues like on the road where I've had to get an emergency brick job or where the serpentine belt broke right out in front of Mount Rushmore and
Oh
had to get
boy.
it towed back. And yeah, so it just makes it even more of an adventure.
I love it. I love it. And as we have been exploring out here and when I moved to Vegas from Chicago, I wanted to go out to the desert and do some car camping. And I'm doing it now. I have my Subaru Crosstrek, aka Subaru. It's red, gorgeous car. A little on the small side for a big guy like me, but neither here nor there. But then I started to look at the other modes of transportation and you and I are podcasting right now. We have a wireless connection. My clients that I'm coaching are all over the country. I need a wireless connection. And I began to contemplate. I love that word contemplate because there's a nagging feeling that's the pre-contemplation and the contemplate. Now I'm actually thinking about how do I get it? How do I accomplish this? Kind of like going to Isle Royal with you. How does one, if they wanted to live full time and work in their van? I mean, when you're traveling, for example, to Isle Royal, I would imagine that once you get there, you're out of electronics range. There's no way you're talking to anybody, maybe with those handheld beepers in case you run into
Mhm.
trouble. But are you pretty much there's no technology around to communicate with anybody?
Well, I mean, as a gear reviewer, I've had the opportunity to test out like a few different devices. So I just returned a great little device called a Somewhere, which is SOMEWEAR device. And that allows you to send like an SOS or use satellites to send a text to one or two contacts. So I used that probably for 6 or 7 months, and it was great. It worked when it needed to. And now I'm hoping to get my hands on the Garmin. I think it's the Garmin Reach Mini, which is another device that allows you to stay in contact uh, with friends and family, send an SOS. There's a mapping aspect they can do. It's just a more robust emergency device.
Okay. When you get to Isle Royal, when you are gathering content data for the story, are you writing in a notebook or transcribing in a recorder? How are you doing this?
So 99 times out of 100, like I'm very old school. So I've got my old school journalist reporter notebook, and then I've got the Pilot Precise pens, which I refuse to write with anything else. So I've been using these for 20 years now,
Okay.
and it's just what works for me.
What is okay, so I'm gonna plead ignorance here. I know what the notebook is. I picked up a couple when I was at the conference. I actually
Mhm.
like them. So
Oh
I
yeah.
love taking notes in notebooks. The Precise pen, is that's just a real pen? There's no James
Yeah. Yeah.
Bond type of
No,
thing to it. Okay.
not at all. It's very lightweight. It flows really well. It just fits perfectly in my hand. Yeah.
Total old school. Okay, I love it. Now, when you get to the adventure, are you running along the way? Are you getting back to camp with in the morning? I can imagine I would have to brew coffee in the evening. I'd have to have my flask of whiskey or
Mhm.
scotch. Do you sit
We
down
do
and
need to
that's
take
what
a
you're
trip
doing?
together.
We do.
Yeah, so, like, when away from my van, let's say Isle Royal when I'm camping, I have the little Starbucks packets and camp stove, and so every morning I make sure to make coffee, and then at night I do have, like a Stanley travel flask that
Okay.
I've had for years. So yeah, I always make sure I have those small little luxuries when I'm doing like a backpacking or a kayak trip. When I'm in the van, it makes it so much easier. I have a coffee maker in the van. I drink so much coffee, I can't do the pour over or anything. I
Really?
just have to
Okay.
have like massive amounts. And then typically I keep a bottle of bourbon somewhere in the van. And then I've got my van is pretty tricked out. So it's a 2000 Road Trek 190 Popular, which is
Okay.
a Class B camper van. So I've got a fridge and sink and like all of the toilet for people who might be concerned or interested.
And
So
by the way, nobody ever writes about or talks about that topic unless you specifically search for it on YouTube. There's all these YouTube videos. Oh, look at us. We are camping out in the ocean and we're going here, we're going there. nobody's talking about, okay, I get it, but how are you doing that?
Well, one of the first articles I wrote for Outside was about renting a camper van.
Yeah.
And one of the things I mentioned is just be aware that you have the toilet in the van, but you're going to have to empty it. So, and no RV brochure ever glamorizes someone standing at the black tank and
Yeah.
dumping it at the campground.
Yeah. There was a discussion on a YouTube video not long ago, and the difference between the composting, the tank, and then you had the cartridge tank,
Uh,
which seemed to be that's the logical way to go because
mhm.
I can't imagine. I mean, we're talking dirty stuff here, folks. Getting that material, that stuff
Yeah.
out of and there's hoses, and nobody talks about you got to hook that stuff up and you got to clean it. And it's
Mhm.
like, I wish people would just not hide it, not sugarcoat it. You got to worry about this stuff. I love it.
Yeah. And I will be the first to admit that sometimes when you're emptying out the black tank and you've got the hoses and everything, there is sometimes spillage or like splatter. You just have to roll with it. I mean, because
Yeah.
it's not the most pleasant thing in the world, but it lets you get out where you want to be. So you take the
Right.
good with the bad, or the
There you
bad with the
go.
good.
Now, your wife, Dee, does she get to go out with you? And, or is this like, okay, this is your thing, Robert? I'm hanging out here.
She has a great job.
Right.
Like people think I have a great job. She has a great job where she's a concert booker here in Indianapolis. So she
Okay.
brings in a lot of bands from all over the country to play at these venues that she works with. So she is incredibly busy
Okay.
in her own right. But she does fly out from time to time if I'm doing like a long trip. So last year I did about a 6 week trip to the Southeast. And then I did a 2 month trip in the Southwest. And both times she flew out to meet me and she stayed for like probably about 4 or 5 days. And then she flew. Yeah. So, and that's about the maximum amount of time that she wants to be in the van. So not as out she's not as in love with the outdoors as I am, except when it's a music festival or something. So after 4 days, she's all right. I need a hotel. I need a shower, and pretty much she's just done.
I love it. I love it. In your excursions, doing your work, is there one or two places that have just totally overwhelmed you? And I mean it in a good sort of way, or just like, oh my God, this is like amazing. Anything like that kind of blow you away? Besides
Uh,
Isle Royal.
well, I would probably say the better question, like the places I go to that don't just wow me.
The next question, by the way. You can answer that one first if you want. It's okay.
Well, let's talk about the first question first. Wow. Yeah, I mean, just like in my office, I've got photos I've taken from all my various travels. I've got on my left leg, I have a tattoo of like all these national parks. It's the national park Arrowhead logo,
Right.
but I've substituted like certain places that have special meaning to
Right.
me. And so like Katmai National Park up
Mhm.
in Alaska, where I got nose to snout with wild brown bears, like the
Oh
coastal
boy.
grizzlies, which is still the most amazing experience I've ever had in my entire life. Yosemite, earlier this year, I was up in the Hudson Bay area photographing wild wolves. Yeah, I mean, I'm just so lucky where like there's so many gorgeous, incredible places out in the world where you go and you're just you're trying as hard as you can just not to break down and sob just because of just how gorgeous and incredible it is.
Okay. If you were to be taken to and let off in a city, let's just say I'm pulling this out of the top of my head, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Mhm,
I don't think I've never been to Nebraska. I know they have tornadoes there and there's
mhm.
probably lots of farmland. Could you find an amazing place there that would be worthy of some of the publications you've written for?
Oh, you can always find places. You just ask around and people, especially places like I would imagine Lincoln, but here I live in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I like to joke. I think when we met, I mentioned that I was from Indianapolis, which is the outdoor adventure capital of the world. And he kind of looked at me for a second. It's just like, is he serious? But even you don't think of Indiana as having all these gorgeous places, like gorgeous natural places. But I live 2.5 miles from a great state park called Fort Harrison State Park. There are places down in Brown County, which is about 90 minutes south of here, that has incredible mountain biking, which is not something that you think of Indiana as having. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where if you're willing to look for it, you can always find some place. And it might not be as incredible as, like, say, the like Grand Teton or Yellowstone, but it's still, for the people living there, it is an opportunity for them to get out in nature and see something that, like, outside of their daily lives.
When you meet someone in one of the locations where you're at, the local, so to speak, what are the questions that you're asking them when you get there?
Pretty much, where do you go? When I was in Utah a few years ago, I was right outside of Grand Staircase Escalante,
Mhm.
and I was in a bar, which is my normal go to, and I was talking to some local folks, and and I was just telling them, it's like, how gorgeous that area was, and they volunteered. I was like, "Oh, you haven't seen anything." I mean, because it's just such a wide open area, and there are places you really can't get to by road. You have to hike in or take an ATV or what have you. And they told me, it's after a few drinks, oh, well, tomorrow we'll take you out there and we'll show you. I think one of the things that they were talking, like just some gorgeous rock features that you wouldn't believe. And so I'm like, oh yeah, that would be great. And then as we were talking a little bit more, they asked, it's like, oh, so what do you do for a living? I mean, we know you're from Indianapolis, but what do you do? And then I had to be honest. I'm like, well, I'm a travel writer. And they were like, oh yeah, we're not going to show you. Because they don't want the rest of the world finding out about these hidden gems. And it's not like for a selfish reason. They're trying to protect it from people who might come in and like
Right.
damage it. You've seen the Instagram stories, and
Yeah.
so I totally understood that.
Yeah.
I was disappointed, but I understood.
Sure. So you get to the location, obviously the bar, some
Mhm.
good bourbon, maybe some
Yep.
good microbrew. How about the food? Anything stand out for you food wise? I'm a food guy, by the way, so love.
I wish I was more of a foodie. I just don't have that refined palate that I'm sure you have and some other folks have. And I've talked to several colleagues who are more food writers, and talked to them about how I could incorporate more of that in my writing. But it's just not where my talents, and that's just not my go-to area, unfortunately.
Okay, so you're like just a Campbell soup and ramen noodle kind of guy.
I'm very simple. I'm a
Okay.
simple man with simple pleasures.
Okay, so I'll tell you what, when we do get together, by the way, I roast my own coffee, so I will be bringing good coffee.
Yeah,
Okay.
I heard you mention that on one of your other podcasts.
Yeah. So I'll take care of that one. And yeah, I'm always like, I'm all about the morning and the coffee, and then the evening and the sunsets with an
Mhm.
adult beverage, and whatever happens in between, whatever. I'm a happy guy.
Yeah.
As you look at your career now, and I mean, you definitely, and for our listeners, we're going to provide the backlinks in just a minute to some of Robert's work. But you look at your work, this body of work that you have been producing, is there something that is on your list of like, God, I really want to do this. I really want to do this.
Oh gosh, I've got notebooks filled with ideas of
Okay.
where I want to go, potential topics for when I get there. Yeah. So there's almost too many to mention. So I would like to spending the last few years traveling around the US, and I'll never be able to see everything. And it's just like a massive country.
It's impossible.
Yeah, I would love to explore more outside the country, be it Latin America or Asia. I mean, and I've been like several of those places, but I'd love to spend more time and explore a little bit more.
Okay. Okay. As you think about what you have accomplished career wise as a journalist and now as a freelance outdoor journalist, if somebody comes up to you and they say, Robert, I just read this article in Lonely Planet or Bicycling or Outside, I really want to do that. How do I do that? What would you say to them?
Well,
What advice?
hopefully they'd read the article and it explains it.
I don't
But
mean that, the article itself, but your career, what you do for a living.
oh, okay. That's a good question. And people have asked me this in the past. It's one of those things where you have to have a passion
Mhm.
for what you're doing. It helps. I'm not really qualified to do anything else.
This is
If I wasn't doing this, I might be playing steel guitar in some country cover band on my third marriage. And so it's one of those things where it's, especially for me, where I'm away from friends and family for months at a time and traveling thousands of miles by myself. I've spent more nights in a Cracker Barrel parking lot or a
uh,
Walmart parking lot than I would like to admit. So there is a lot of, I don't want to say negative, but you do have to be aware there are some hardships, but they kind of pale in comparison to the rewards. So if they wanted to do what I do, I wouldn't even say go to journalism school. I would just say get outside, have a very unique perspective, and just explore and keep an open mind.
okay. Something just dawned on me as you were sharing that piece. When you are on the road, putting the thousands of miles on this 20-year-old Sprinter van, do you play music or is there just the conversation going on and dialogue going on in your head? Or is it a combination?
Oh gosh, I would not want to be talking to myself all of those miles. So what I'll do is I'll have a combination of audiobooks, music. I'm a huge music fan. We talked a little bit about Cocaine and Rhinestones. That's one of my favorite podcasts. Hidden Compass, which is one of the websites I write for. They have an amazing podcast that everyone should.
It's Outdoor Adventure Series, by the way.
Exactly, exactly. Well, I didn't want to kind of blow up with your spot here, but yeah. So this past trip, I listened to a book called Engineering Eden, which talks about the national park bear management in the 1950s and 60s. I listened to a lot of like nature books and fly fishing and just whatever I can get my ears on.
Okay. Before we head out, eh, as you look back now, again, this is an opportunity to be a little bit more reflective in what you have accomplished. What would you, what is that insight for you? I mean, what that's like, oh my God, I get to do this. And what a journey. What would be that aha moment that we like to say when you're really grappling or taking amazement of like, oh my God, this is what I've done. This is what I'm doing.
Mhm. Wow, great question. For me, so the article I'm most proud of is a piece called Eroded Myths that I wrote for Hidden Compass last year. And it talks about a trip I made to the Dakotas about a year and a half ago. My dad had passed away, and I'd been kind of grappling with depression for quite a bit before that. And so Teddy Roosevelt, when his wife and mother passed away within 24 hours of each other, he went to the Dakotas, specifically Medora, North Dakota, which is the site of Theodore Roosevelt National Park now. So I decided to follow in his footsteps, so to speak. And it was right around the time where I was starting to make some connections in my mind between my dad and Theodore Roosevelt, who were two seminal figures in my childhood. But both of them had some problematic views when it comes to race and America. So I was kind of grappling with a lot of these questions about legacy and what it means to be a great man, and if you can be a great man but not a good man, or there was a lot of different concepts that were running through my mind. So I spent a few weeks out in the Dakotas, in the Badlands, and just doing a lot of hiking and going to these places that, as I was doing one hike, and I remember thinking, it's like, I wonder if 150 years ago, if Roosevelt had actually like climbed the same rock or what have you, and kind of put myself in their mindset. And I remember doing a hike and just seeing this incredible vista in front of me, and just wishing my dad was there to see it with me, and just breaking down. Yeah, it was it was one of those trips where it was very it, it was just very beneficial for me,
Sure.
and it helped me get to a much healthier place in my life.
Very good. We appreciate you gifting us with that story. It's heartfelt, and thank you for sharing that. One last item before we head out is any final thoughts that you would like to share with our listeners about your work, or perhaps an article you've written, read, perhaps there's a quote, a book you'd like to recommend to our audience?
Oh gosh. Well, if someone wants to become a travel writer, like we had discussed, probably the best thing that they can do is read Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck, who was a forerunner of van life. He wrote all of these incredible novels and works of fiction, but he also did this cross country road trip with his dog that is just, it's such a great book. And I love reading it and rereading it. And then the Tim Cahill, who is my all-time favorite writer, and if he knew who I was and read anything that I wrote, he would probably sue me for copyright infringement. So yeah, I mean, just seek out all these incredible writers, and kind of build your career, kind of take the best from all the writers that you read and add your own unique perspective, and yeah, hopefully it'll pay dividends in the future.
I love it. Thank you. If our
Thank you.
listeners, yeah, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
They can go to my website, robertannis.com, which has links to all of my articles. They can find my daily thoughts on Twitter, which they might not want to read. And then there are photos of my various trips and journeys on Instagram.
Fantastic. Well, we will provide the backlinks to the website, robertannis.com, as well as your links to Twitter. I've taken down Twitter from certain places because of my views, but also we're going to provide a backlink to Instagram as well. And we're really just been a fantastic interview today. I appreciate you taking the time. And for what it's worth, we are well past the 54th minute of this
Oh,
episode.
wow.
Even with a little bit of editing, we're going to have about a 50-minute episode. So how about that? I said it was going to be about 30 minutes. So
Well, I apologize for just talking way too much.
I wasn't asking for an apology, by the way, but I am
Well,
like so glad you were able to join us today, and I'm excited about your trip to Isle Royal. Cannot wait to read the article, see the pictures, and if you make the third trip up there, I'm your guy.
hey,
Uh,
I can't wait.
but if somehow, somewhere, I'm going to be meeting up with you, we're gonna do some traveling together, and we'll incorporate podcasting in with the writing and the photography. Who knows?
Sounds great.
Thank you again. Yeah.
Hey, thank you. I had a wonderful time.
Fantastic. Well, appreciate it. Listen, stay on the line. We're gonna do a quick close, and then you and I can have a final chat.
Okay, great.
All right. Okay, folks. Well, probably one of our longer episodes of late, and what a fantastic conversation with Robert Annis. He's a freelance outdoor journalist, and just his story from the crowded office of a newspaper in Indianapolis or Indiana, and then really this career he has built for himself as a freelance writer, whether it's for products, whether it's for gear reviews, destinations, narrative writing, just the library of content that he has created. You definitely have to check it out. You'll visit his website at robertannis.com, and you can also see a lot of the photos that he has produced on his Instagram page and his Twitter page. So you'll have all those backlinks. But really, we've covered a lot of ground here with Robert today, and hope you appreciated the variation of what we have been chatting about. Some soul searching, some insights, and really definitely a passion there for the work that he's doing. And in fact, also to the woman in his life, gives her a little bit of a respite as he goes off and explores, and she gets to listen to some cool bands and helps plan that. That's got to be pretty cool profession as well. So as far as we're concerned, you can find us on our website, outdooradventureseries.com. You can find us on LinkedIn and on Facebook on our Outdoor Adventure Series pages. We are on YouTube. Now, the video of this episode will be up on our YouTube channel, and we are on all of the major podcast directories. So wherever you listen to your podcast, just search for Outdoor Adventure Series. And I do want to say on YouTube, if you do find us there, do click on the big red subscribe button and like it and share it, because we really are enjoying introducing the video element to our podcast episodes. Okay, folks, until we are back with another Outdoor Adventure Series episode, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we will see you shortly. Take care now.